Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Weekly Notice with Andy Ngo. As always, please leave your questions and comments during the live stream, and I will get to it later on in the show. So, we are in May 2022. It is now 2 years since the death of George Floyd. Yesterday, there were lots of so called anniversary direct actions and protests and rallies um, in honor of this George Floyd anniversary. In New York City, compared to previous years, it was actually very peaceful. I mean, the worst that they did in New York was to set an American flag on fire, which is just a pastime activity for them. The symbolism, of course, behind that is that the United States is an enemy to those who are supporters of what they say is BLM or racial justice. So they believe that their agenda cannot be achieved until the United States is literally burnt down, which is why they burn symbols of the United States, as well as literally set its institutions on fire, like courthouses, police stations, and of course businesses being that they represent capitalism, and capitalism is an enemy within this particular worldview. And as I've talked about in other podcasts, and as many of you are probably aware of, the irony here is that the BLM leaders have enriched themselves so much off while claiming to be Marxist and communist. So, okay, let me do screen share. So, just ahead of the anniversary yesterday, there was a pretty embarrassing mistake from the Washington Post. If I'm being generous, some people are saying that they were reckless or intentionally lying. I'll just show you what the Washington Post wrote. So, the Washington Post, a few days ago, had put out a tweet and also a page on its official news site asking for people to submit their experiences of how things have or have not changed 2 years after George Floyd died. And I'll just read you what their tweet said. And the same wording was reflected also on the link on their website. But they wrote, on May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was shot and killed in police custody. His death sparked outrage, wide-scale protests, and calls to change policing. Did anybody notice what was wrong with that? George Floyd was never shot in custody. In fact, according to the chief medical examiner for Hennepin County that did the official autopsy, George Floyd's the reason that he died was cardiopulmonary arrest. And the medical examiner also noted that there was nothing to support, and I'm quoting now, a diagnosis of traumatic asphyxia or strangulation. To this day, you still hear that George Floyd died because his neck was compressed by the knee and he couldn't breathe, and that's what killed him, or that the knee was pressed so hard against his neck that his neck breathing ability collapsed and he died. Those are lies. Now, we've had the autopsy for years at this point, which you can read. Yeah, and as a side note, there was a lot of fentanyl and other drugs in his system. Fentanyl to the amount of 11 nanograms per milliliter, which for most humans is a fatal level. So, yes, this is how we got a start to the George Floyd anniversary. And then, well, what happened in Portland is what always happens, which is that with Antifa, you don't need an excuse to riot or not. They're going to use any reason to carry out acts of violence, which is exactly what happened. And it was all entirely predictable. Here we go. So earlier in the week, Antifa were distributing this virtual flyer remembering George Floyd, the anniversary, May 25th, Pioneer Square, 8 p.m. So as always, it's always announced beforehand, and yet police did not respond. What ended up happening overnight is that, they dressed up in black bloc after their vigil in Pioneer Square, and then they blocked the streets and terrorized the public again. I'll just play a little of the video. So this is pretty normal for Portland. You know, the fact that you don't see a lot of things set on fire on the street is actually, I guess, a positive considering what's normally happens. So they blocked down the streets of downtown. At one point here, they blocked a bus, public bus, from being able to drive, and there were passengers on that bus, and in a way, it kind of created a hostage situation, right? They prevented this bus from lawfully driving on the street. They vandalized the bus and then they left. So, police stayed away. That is the MO of the Portland police now when it comes to Antifa. And of course, and this is from a local reporter in Portland. I'm just going to read her tweet. The group of people dressed in all black and wearing face coverings are now blocking 3rd Avenue near the federal courthouse. So they were carrying out this criminal direct action in the areas where they always do it, which is in front of the Justice Center, in front of the federal courthouse. They usually also occupy the park space that's right in front. In 2020, that was the park that became their base of operations. It's city property, and the city allows it, turns a blind eye. And of course, there was a lot of graffiti. There was graffiti calling for the killing of police, kill KKK cops. They often write this. This one's a bit interesting. Dan Ryan hates houseless people. So Dan Ryan is one of the city council commissioners for the city of Portland. He's relatively new to the job. He came in 2020, and he fashions himself as a liberal moderate, and the radical left and Antifa hate him for that. One of the first things that he did that was noteworthy is that he voted against the amendment to change a proposal in the city. Joanne Hardesty, which is a very radical far left BLM Antifa supporting woman on city council, had proposed to defund the police, and Dan Ryan had voted against that in 2020. And as revenge for that, what Antifa did was they went to his home, his family home, and they attacked it and was breaking his property and terrorizing him at his home. And they've always hated him from that moment onwards, and also that the fact that he doesn't support allowing encampments to go on indefinitely on public streets. This is earlier this morning, so you can see in better daylight. Somebody wrote for Floyd in red paint in front of the Justice Center, and they also shot blood-looking red paintballs at the building. If you see here, the entirety of it is boarded up. Where the spray paint is written, where that paint is, that's wood. Normally, that's not supposed to be there, but we haven't even seen the Justice Center in the biggest city in Portland. And the Justice Center, by the way, has courthouses inside. If I recall correctly, does it have the sheriff's office, or is that a different building next door? Anyways, there's a lot of things related to criminal justice inside here. It's very important for the county and the city. It's been boarded up now for more than 2 years. All of this wood that you see on top, by the way, those are normally glass windows. It was a really beautiful building that's remained just an eyesore in Portland, and a reminder to this day that it's still not safe for city functions to carry out as normal. And if you're standing directly in front of the Justice Center here in downtown, directly to the left of it is the U.S. federal courthouse, the one that was under siege for an entire month in 2020, the ones that Antifa repeatedly tried to burn down. And they wrote all these messages all over. I think this is outside of the Central Police Station, which is all these buildings are right next to each other, by the way. Murderers, Rip George Floyd. So I was looking at some of the chat from the Antifa accounts. They were some of them expressed disappointment that there wasn't more violence. Yeah, so blocking the streets, terrorizing drivers, and graffiti is considered a pretty good night for Portland, unfortunately. What's fascinating to me with all these graffitis is that the city sort of just ignores it, and the messages of far less violent extremism is ignored. Whereas whenever there's graffiti that somehow expresses, let's say, racist sentiment or some view that is associated with the right or the far right, then you can see the reaction is everybody freaks out and they launch investigations. They get the different agencies involved. They often try to get the FBI involved, particularly when there are accusations of a hate crime graffiti. But when it comes to this type of graffiti, nobody gives a damn. And I'm going to bring your attention to some graffiti that unfortunately is personal. So at Lonsdale Square, which is at the park right in front of where the Justice Center is, there's graffiti that says, it reads, "Spoon says, kill Andy No." They wrote it several times on different things. Let's see if it was. Yeah. Spoon says, kill Andy No. So who or what is Spoon? Well, that's the moniker for this person on the left. This individual's fake name, Antifa member name, is Spoon. The real name is legally Andrea Munn, but the name before that was Jacob Camello. So I'm just going to refer to this person as Camello, since that was the name that the surname that this individual had for most of its life. Camello is an Antifa member in Portland who killed itself in autumn of last year. And you're probably noticing that I said itself. I'm not being insensitive or dehumanizing to this person. That was actually the Antifa members' preferred pronouns. And actually, when the death was announced, the response from Antifa repeatedly was, please remember Spoon's pronouns were it, its. And so a lot of people thought this individual was she, hers, because at one point, this trans individual did use she, her. So changed pronouns multiple times, but the most recent one was it and its. This individual killed themselves, and Antifa have taken to vandalize parts of Portland and to destroy property in this person's memory, because this person was a violent extremist who was arrested at a riot last year, by the way, and charged with multiple felonies, although the case was later dismissed. This person had a Twitter. I believe it's still up, although the account is now private, so you can no longer see these posts. But this is from October of 2021. You can see how extreme they were. So this is Spoon, also known as Jacob Camello. Kyle Rittenhouse is white supremacist scum. The judge needs to get his teeth kicked in. Kyle's fans are low-life simps that couldn't find their ass from their mouth if a map was given. Andy Ngo is a smug fascist child. Burn a fucking fascist, excuse my swearing. It's good for your health. So really extreme. And this is one of the person's last posts. Jacob Camello announcing it's suicide. So all in all, this is my last tweet. By the time some of you read this, I will become food for worms. I made up my mind. Very sad, actually. I saw the thread before the account had been locked down, and this person obviously suffered from very severe mental conditions and challenges, and unfortunately had found community in Antifa, a community that ultimately led itself to not find fulfillment in life and to kill itself. And Antifa, I think they honor this person by calling for violence under their name, putting out graffiti calling for me to be murdered, attributed to this person. This individual also worked as a sex worker. A lot of the Antifa members are involved in that work. They do it online to make cash on the side. And Jacob Camello Spoon specialty was fetish porn, where it stuck needles through parts of its body. So yeah. And this is a sample of many of the posts of how they chose to honor when Spoon killed itself. Yeah, their eulogies were essentially calling for violence. And when I reported on this last year, by the way, Antifa responded by then threatening me with death. There were dozens and dozens of posts. They were very furious that I showed this person's face and revealed their real name and their criminal history in Multnomah County. That was infuriating to Antifa. So to this day, they still call for me to be murdered with this person's name. Yeah. So the targeting of churches or religious institutions or pregnancy centers have continued, by the way, since the leaked opinion draft of the Supreme Court regarding Roe v. Wade. And I've been documenting the vandalisms on Twitter and adding to it one by one. Unfortunately, there's almost some type of new vandalism happening every day. I'm just gonna go over some new additions that I've documented. So there was a pro-life billboard in the Portland area this is how it was vandalized. It originally said "Choose Life" and has a photograph of a mother and a baby, and aborting court, my body, my choice, and of course the A symbol. So I guess the political ideology that's been most prevalent in these vandalisms has been from so-called anarchists, which is the ideology of Antifa. Jane's Revenge. Remember that group? The group that claimed the arson attack on the pro-life organization in Wisconsin, the one that wrote, "If abortions aren't safe, then neither are you," that threat. Well, that group, after claiming that attack and promising more, they've carried out a number of other vandalisms in different parts of the country. The people who are doing it have sent the claims of responsibility to an Antifa blog site. They claim to be part of different cells. So the targeting on May 23rd by Jane's Revenge happened in, where did this go? Olympia, Washington, which is the capital of Washington State. It's about 2.5 hours north of Portland, Oregon, not too far from Seattle. So they targeted let's see, Calvary Chapel, Harbor Church, St. Michael's Parish, so Catholic churches mostly, and then also a Latter-day Saints church, also known as a Mormon church. Um, they did vandalisms and they released a statement to the Antifa blog. I highlighted in yellow some relevant things from their claim of responsibility. So again, a top communique from Jane's Revenge, Bo Brown Memorial Cell. So they even give a name particular to the cell in the Pacific Northwest. They wrote, in the likelihood that abortion remains legal in Western Washington after Roe v. Wade is overturned, there are still local enemies. So that's how they refer to these churches, as enemies, enemy combatants who they need to enact revenge and violence against. This is the language of violent extremists. This is the language of terrorists, to be frank. Um, I censored out here other targets that they listed out, not because the information is private. It's this post, for example, is public and you can find easily what they wrote, but it's just uh, journalists always have to kind of weigh like what information do you publish that potentially puts a group at risk of violence somehow. And in this case, because Jane's Revenge has called for revenge, that's why I took the step to censor this information. And one of the last lines says each of these businesses should be considered responsible for the violence of forced birth. Also euphemisms, right? They call, well, as others have probably pointed out, like forced pregnancy and forced birth, then the euphemisms, but they're also incredibly inaccurate. Even the strongest of anti-abortion um, activists don't believe that people should be forcibly impregnated. The pregnancy has already happened, and they're taking a position that they're against that life. They view it as human life, as a baby. Morally and legally should not be terminated because it's an independent life from that of the mother, and therefore they don't factor in the bodily autonomy argument because it's not just the body of the pregnant mother, it's now also the body of a developing second human. Unfortunately, there is more vandalism. One moment, I'm going to pull up some tweets. This one happened either late Sunday night or early Monday morning this week in Mississippi, and it was a black church that was targeted. Very sad. So it's vandalism across like on every inch essentially of this small Protestant black church. It has a very tiny congregation. According to this journalist, he interviewed a member of this church, the deacon, and they said they have like 5 members, and they're all elderly. So yeah, girls just want to have fundamental human rights. That was written on the doors. There's a lot of other pro-abortion slogans. There's a drawing here on the right of a rape happening. Keep your laws off my body. So a lot of these vandalisms on these religious institutions they're a bit indiscriminate. They're just targeting anything they view as Christian. They don't really care about the denominations that we've had, primarily Catholic institutions and buildings targeted, but also Protestant ones and Mormon ones as well. So, as far as I know, I don't think there's been any vandalism, pro-abortion vandalism on Jewish or Muslim house of worship yet. Yes, this journalist Stephen Pimpo in Mississippi interviewed the deacon. He was just shocked. It's small, tiny, elderly congregation. Look, says the church body's 4 to 5 members, all over 60. So, yeah. For those of you who just joined or maybe joining late, remember, please leave your questions and comments in the live stream, and I will get to it. Thanks for joining, by the way. This is already episode 9, more than 2 months of this weekly show. I would appreciate some feedback, actually. Either I think if you write in under this, not necessarily in the live stream, but you can also write after it's done on the show. You can, because my Getter post is still up, and you can post your ons. I like reading the feedback, like what people think of this format. Sometimes I put some of the short snippets on YouTube as well, so other people are aware that the show's happening. But this is exclusive to Getter right now, and I've had to really grow into this. I think I talked about in the first couple of episodes, I was really shy and nervous, and that doing even a pretty simple live stream can be a little bit, the worst things is when there are technical issues happening during a live stream. There's not really much you can do. So, okay. Yeah. Antifa have taken on like the abortion issue as the thing to call for violence. So they always need something. They exist only in opposition to X, Y, or Z. Of course, they always say they're against fascism and against racism. Now they say they're against forced pregnancies, forced births. They have nothing really that they're for. I mean, they have certain visions of what the utopia would look like. Of course, whenever it manifests in real life, it leads to death and destruction, such as in Chaz. Also leads to violence, such as in the autonomous zone that was in Atlanta for months now, although last week it was raided by the Atlanta police. So this is Marisa Elizabeth Leyva. I've talked about her before on my Twitter because she sent me many death threats against me. And this mugshot, she's originally from the Phoenix, Arizona area. She was arrested at a BLM Antifa riot in 2020. She was charged with a whole bunch of felonies. The case did end up being dismissed. And what's perhaps shocking or not is she did work at that time in the medical healthcare industry. She was a registered certified nursing assistant in the state of Arizona. Anyways, she has been banned multiple times on Twitter for violent extremism. She previously ran an account called Antifa that's been suspended, and then she ran Bird Out Fugitive that was suspended. So she's on at least her third account that I could find. And so on this third account, this ban evasion, she put out a tweet about pregnancy centers that she would like to see set on fire. Yeah, for this, I contemplated censoring it because it does, one risk giving people ideas, I suppose. But I was censoring it. I didn't know how, you wouldn't really be able to understand the seriousness of what this individual was calling for. So I presented it. And I think pregnancy resource centers are already, unfortunately, aware of the violence that they've been subjected to now for several weeks. So yeah, Marisa Leyva posted that. This is from a post from February of this year on her prior account that got banned. Okay, so it's time for Andy Ngo to effing die. Heard. This is from her most recent account. I'm swinging on pro-lifers, no questions asked from here on out. I'm past arguing online and screaming in the street. If you support or had a hand in this, I'm going to F you up on site. This is no longer a effing debate. This violence will be met with violence. Yeah, so Antifa and people like Marisa believe that if you hold a um, pro-life position, or if you're against abortion, that that is a violent idea, therefore they can carry out preemptive violence against you. It's also how they justify violence against anybody they call fascist, by the way. And then they say that they're just defending themselves or their communities. This is consistent entirely with their ideology and modus operandi. Um, this is, yeah, Marisa Leiva's account, very extreme. You see a lot of Antifa have been sharing, by the way, the picture that was on her banner. It's a uterus and the sign. I mean, it looks like a cute drawing, but if you look at the sign that the uterus cartoon is holding, it says, "If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either," which is the threat from Jane's Revenge. And the cartoon uterus is holding a firebomb in its hand. Yeah. So Marisa Leiva had moved at some point to the Portland area. And this was her response to those to Justice Alito and his family being moved for safety reasons. Leiva wrote, "Good, stay scared. This is just the beginning." This I looked up her certificate in the state of Arizona as a certified nursing assistant, and this was what shows up. Pretty scary that this individual worked with patients that are vulnerable. Um, our entire society is crumbling before our eyes, and I'm honestly just waiting for the riots to start. I'm ready, y'all. Just say the word. Violent extremists, I would argue, espouses support for domestic terrorism. Yeah. This is from a post from her last year, by the way. This is very revealing on Facebook. I'm going to read the second paragraph. "I'm not a Democrat or a progressive. I'm a full-blown, cop-hating, radical left Antifa, exonerated alleged ACAB gang member who was indicted on multiple violent felonies that had me looking at 46 years. I'm actively trying to abolish prisons and police, and I wholeheartedly support riots in the streets. F12, F white supremacy, and F this racist country." Yeah. Hmm. And while on the anti pro-abortion subject, I'm going to continue. There's a lot to say on that. This is a story out of Portland that I reported out last night. So this is Jennifer Thompson. I first became aware of her because she was involved in she was at the Antifa riots in Portland in 2020, and she stands out, primarily because she's an Asian American woman. You'll notice that um, you almost never see that among the Antifa ranks. They're overwhelmingly white, but even when there are ethnic minorities represented, you will almost never see somebody of East Asian background. So she stood out in that regard, and she's a violent extremist. She uses her social media and she brands herself as a BLM slash anti-fascist slash abortion rights activist. She holds really militant and extreme views. Um, she was on this. She was a big guest speaker at a recent pro-abortion protest in Portland, and the big sign said, "White women, you said you would riot," and it has pictures of fire bombs on it. So she's standing, by the way, to the woman on the right here in the magenta pink shirt. Um, that's her legal name is Princess Unicorn. She had changed it legally from something else. But Princess Unicorn is the Antifa member in Portland who is behind many of the GoFundMe fundraisers to raise money for Antifa militants. And she'll do it in a way that will obscure the identity of who she's raising the money for. And many of the campaigns I've brought attention to have been in explicit violation of GoFundMe's terms of service. For example, raising money for those accused of violent felonies. That's not supposed to be allowed on GoFundMe. But as we've discussed many times, GoFundMe doesn't really take action against far left violent extremism on its platform. Yeah, so Jennifer Thompson was a guest speaker recently and was upset that white liberal women haven't been becoming violent as much as they would like. She recently posted a really graphic story. It's called "Shout Your Abortion." I think it started out as a campaign, but basically it's to normalize women to share their experiences of having an abortion and being proud of it. Um, and so, I mean, that's the direction much of the so-called pro-choice movement has moved in. It's not about abortion should be accessible, safe, and uncommon or rare, but now that it should happen, it's good that it's happened, and we're proud of it. So Jennifer Thompson um, shared her graphic abortion story, and I'm going to read from some of her posts, which were pinned on her account because she had received a lot of praise. I think one thing I should contextualize is Jennifer Thompson was born in Hong Kong and adopted by a white American family. So she's an adoptee, and she was proud of a late term abortion that she had recently in Portland. And content warning for those who are sensitive around this stuff. Um, yeah. So Saturday, January 15th, 2022, at approximately 4 p.m. I'm mid ultrasound when the doctor puts the machine down and looks at me to tell me I'm somewhere around 29 weeks pregnant. Okay, pausing for a moment. She um, she was actually less than 29 weeks, but she was at nearly 7 months pregnancy. So that's that's very late in the pregnancy. At that point, the baby is viable, actually. And continue reading her tweets. My only options were to go to New Mexico or Colorado, where there are 2 clinics that can help me, but I need to travel within the week. Saturday, January 15th, 2022, at approximately 5 p.m. My friend advocates for me to get my abortion process started at OHSU. OHSU is Oregon Health and Science University. It's a hospital and a series of clinics, and also a medical university. It's the largest medical institution, and she says that as she didn't have to travel for her late-term abortion, she got it started in Portland. January 15th, 2022, at approximately 7 p.m. So the same day, right? Just within hours, she was able to get this late-term abortion, no questions asked. At OHSU, getting a full confirmation of how pregnant I am, 27.5 weeks. I get a shot through my abdomen to stop the heartbeat. To be completely transparent, I don't know a lot about about the various abortion procedures. I wasn't aware that one of the late-term abortion strategies is to get an injection to stop the heart of the beating child that would otherwise be viable. It's yeah, just when you think of it in reality of what it is, it just made me pause. Yeah. So she continues. January 17th at approximately 6:30 p.m. After a grueling night filled with so much pain that I needed an epidural, morphine, and fentanyl, I gave birth to a just over 2-pound, 7-inch girl with no heartbeat. Update, checked my chart. My chart is the medical health information record system for OHSU. To confirm, and I was at 27 weeks and 6 days, closer to 28 weeks pregnant. I didn't know when I was going to be ready to share my story, but I guess I was never going to be ready, just effing angry. So here goes nothing. I got an abortion and it saved my effing life. On Twitter, I linked archive to her thread. There are other posts where she goes into other details. Um, she never explains how she needed the abortion immediately to save her life, nor does she explain how she went to nearly 7 months pregnant without realizing she was pregnant. I suspect that she knew earlier. Um, so, yeah, she's called for a lot of violence in Portland. This is one of her many, many tweets. Burn it all the way down. Portland should be lit the F up tonight. This was in response to Kyle Rittenhouse being acquitted. She also has, by the way, Thompson has a mixed record in Portland, even among the far left. This account, which is a far left account, by the way, it is anonymous and it's to alert those in the community militant activist community about those who are either dangerous to the community or exploit the community or are not safe to be around for whatever reason. Anyways, it had posted about Jennifer and it says that she has a history of exploiting white guilt. It doesn't say that here, but that's the subtext to get people to donate money for her. It also says that she does blackfishing, which is where she artificially darkens herself through excessive tanning so that she can identify as brown. I've looked through a lot of pictures at various times. She is a lot lighter and she looks more typically what you would think of somebody who was originally from Hong Kong. And then in many other pictures, she's much, much darker, either with makeup or other artificial means to darken herself. She was also one of the people that called for my book on Antifa to be banned in Portland, which was a successful campaign, by the way, at Pal's Books, which is the largest independent bookstore in I think in America, for sure in Portland, for sure in the Pacific Northwest. It's really huge in response to the violence outside the store. The Pals announced that it had would not sell my book in any of its stores, just online. And they did that to protect itself. It's pretty cowardly because Pal Books says it's dedicated to freedom of speech, and that every year it dedicates like a campaign to ban books that somehow face censorship around the world, and they themselves have engaged in that. And Jennifer Thompson was, of course, part of that. This was a sign that she carried outside of a Pal's bookstore in 2021. And in response to my thread on her, she locked down her account and accused me of doxing her and her abortion story. F him, F his effing followers. I'd get that abortion over and over again. Just for the record, I did not dox her. She's an activist in Portland who appears in front of the cameras and appears center stage at rallies and protests. And her account was public, and that thread detailing her late term abortion of her daughter was pinned on her account for everyone to read. Okay. The big story I have to get to. How could I could not skip this. Okay. By the way, those who join late or joining now, leave questions and comments, please. Okay. Do you guys remember Jessica Yaniv? Jessica Yaniv a few years ago got a hell of a lot of attention on social media and YouTube videos because, she is a Canadian trans activist who had made legal complaints against a number of women's salons in British Columbia, Canada. At that time, she alleged that these businesses, which were many of them were run by Asian immigrant women, had discriminated against her for being trans. She had requested hair removal procedures of the genital area, and some of the women at the businesses did not turn her down as a client because they didn't feel comfortable working on somebody who has a penis and testicles. Um, she got a lot of attention for that. Of course, then people found all these other old posts from Jessica Uni that were controversial, to say the least. So she's been out of the spotlight for many, many months now. I last reported on her last year, at the beginning of last year, when the when the city, what was it? Hold on, let me pull it up. When the township of where she lives wrote her a legal letter accusing her of abusing the emergency services and of sexually harassing first responders. Jessica Yini, this is a story I did last year on her, had uh, allegedly made 30 calls for emergency services, and they said that she was abusing it for essentially frivolous calls. A lot of it had to do with her calling 911 because she was stuck in the bathtub, and she essentially allegedly made lewd behavior to the first responders. Around that time, by the way, Jessica Yaniv had also announced that she had a vaginoplasty, I think is how you say it, colloquially known as a sex change. Graphic content warning. I'm going to show you a censored image that she posted at the time of some complications she was experiencing. Yeah, so she posted the uncensored version of this last year, showing off her vaginoplasty, and it was bloody and graphic, and it appeared to be having some healing complications. Anyways, all that to say, build up, she's back in the news. She's back in the news because a judge has found her guilty of assaulting a journalist. So this is in Surrey, which is in British Columbia. She was filmed on video assaulting, at that time, was a rebel journalist, a good one. I want to make sure I pronounce his name right. Kian. Should follow him, Kian Baxter. So he went to report on her and was assaulted. And now she's been found guilty by a judge for that. However, she's not going to face any prison or jail time. The prosecution is seeking a suspended sentence. Some circumstances that were used as a justification for why they're not seeking a jail sentence or prison sentence is because she's also cared for her mother and some other reasons. So she hasn't been sentenced yet, but and most likely there's not going to be a prison or jail sentence. And okay. And one other thing is that I want to spotlight, by the way, a alleged hate crime that was on the news. So recently in Brooklyn, New York City, there was some pretty shocking swastika graffiti targeting, targeting Jews, essentially. There's a campaign billboard about the Holocaust, and somebody has spray painted a swastika on it. Spray painted it also on a bus stop. Law enforcement released this image of what appeared to be a female doing it, and they're asking for identification. Well, police made an arrest. The suspect in this anti-Semitic swastika graffiti is a 45-year-old Jewish woman named Farnoosh Hakakian. Yeah. Okay. Now to the questions and comments. Thank you, everyone. Okay, give me just a second to read and to drink some tea. This is a question from SJ Happy B. Do you fear Antifa members, or do they mostly just leave you alone and let you live your life? Of course I fear them. I fear them because they have a track record of maiming people, severely injuring people, and even killing people. So of course I fear them. And the fact that many of them have nothing to lose, and the fact that many of them are unemployed, living on public assistance, don't have families, or are estranged from their families, means that they don't have to consider very much to take serious action and even potentially killing people, which is why they've carried out a number of really serious attacks, such as setting buildings on fire when people are inside. No, they don't let me live in peace. As you can see, even though I've had to flee Portland because of the threats on my life, the attempts on my life. You can see, even though I'm so far away, they still riot all the time: kill Andy Ngo, murder Andy Ngo, dismember Andy Ngo. Um, so yeah, don't. The mistake would be to underestimate how violent and extreme they are. PK7 asks, are Antifa involved in drugs or is it just mental illness? Their members are, many of them are drug users, yes, and many of them also have mental health illnesses. That's not my speculation. In many of their accounts on Twitter, they're very open about various mental health conditions that they deal with. And I've talked about before, and I've written about in my book actually in the last chapter that one one does develop a sense of sympathy in a way for them, in that people who are vulnerable, who are, some of them are addicted to substances, and they give substances out to other people, by the way, which happened in 2020. They were accused of giving some teenagers drugs during some of the riots. um, and they're open about their various mental health conditions. These people need help. Instead, the community that they found belonging in is a community that exploits them. Antifa use the most vulnerable to carry out acts of violence, so that if there's ever an investigation and a prosecution, these people go to jail. User the Markets Man wrote, Jennifer Thompson's comments is domestic terrorism. She's calling for violence and murder. Any action by Twitter or the police? Um, well, I wouldn't be privy to know definitively for sure, but I can speculate based on my reporting generally on similar calls to violence from the far left, and that is, no action is taken. At best, Twitter may sometimes force some of these people to delete some of their posts calling for violence, advocating violence. Law enforcement in Portland definitely do not do anything. You can see all the messages they write on Twitter about wanting to kill me, about how I should be killed or murdered. That's not um, considered worthy of investigation or follow up by the Portland police. User American Girl wrote a comment. She wrote, I wonder what happened to Jennifer to make her so hateful. I don't know what happened either, but with a lot of these people who involved with Antifa and the far left, they have, I mean, they don't hide what their anger and hatred. They say they don't. What they're seeking is revenge, and many of these groups have revenge in their names or their slogans. They want others to feel pain and to suffer, and um, these are dangerous people who, unfortunately, because they're far left, they're not seen as a threat to the public, even when they engage in violence, even when they call for violence. So yeah, there's in my view, it's a veil over the eyes of the mainstream left when extremism comes from this side. Um, I think, and that's a failure, I think, on civil society and on journalists and on all these nonprofits that allege to track extremism, is that they don't track far left extremism, or if they do, they make excuses for it when it happens, or they minimize it. and that creates this perception. It puts a veil over the eyes of the public that while left extremism, um, even if they don't agree with the tactics, it's ultimately for good, therefore it should be tolerated anyways. And that's really, really dangerous. We can see historically where that's led um, countries, societies, and individuals. Okay. Angel Cat FL asks, can you tell us more about Jane's Revenge? I'll tell you what is known that's on the record. So Jane's Revenge, we first heard of it just a few weeks ago after the firebombing or the arson attack and the attempted firebombing in Madison, Wisconsin, their pro-life family organization. They released a long statement through an Antifa writer journalist named Robert Evans. He published a statement, which by all accounts is accurate. And this group named Jane's Revenge is anonymous. We don't know who's behind it and how many, but they say that they've been forced to respond in this violence, and they gave an ultimatum that if their demands aren't met, and they made a whole number of demands about abortion, very radical ones. If it isn't met, that there would be an escalation of attacks. That's all we know about this group, and they're releasing their claims of responsibility to these anonymously run Antifa blogs or through Antifa journalists. So from the outside, it's impossible to know who's behind it, right? And they seem to also be trying to inspire and do I recall if they say this? The goal is to inspire autonomous action. That's the language they use, by the way, for others to just be inspired by the group and to take out a similar action. And if this sounds pretty familiar, it's what ISIS did, the Islamic State group. A lot of the terror attacks that happen in the West, in Europe, and in the United States, by the way, were by people who didn't go to Iraq or Syria and had training with ISIS. There were people who all they did was they watched the videos, read the propaganda and statements from the groups, liked it, agree with it, pledged allegiance to the caliph, and then carried out an attack. So Jane's Revenge seems in some of these other far left extremist groups trying to inspire that, by the way. They do that so that it makes it harder for the FBI to break up the entire group, because if it's not a direct sort of like a central command commanding a certain cell to carry out an attack, then when you break off one of the cells through an investigation, let's say, and leads to arrest, you're not able to link that individual or that cell to something higher up, right? Because it's inspiration. Unfortunately, that's the same. We have that issue with jihadism, which makes it an issue that is ongoing, no matter how many cells you break up. And you have that same type of issue now emerging with these far left groups, who so far have carried out some serious acts of arson and attempted fire bombings. Nobody's been injured in relation to the recent pro-abortion violence stuff. I mean, nobody at the church or at these pregnancy centers has been injured, and nobody's been killed. But I wonder how much longer that would hold, given that these people have said on record that they're willing to do anything and everything. So, okay. PK7 wrote in response to what I was saying about mental illness and Antifa. This doesn't surprise me. It reminds me of some of the patients in the hospital I worked at. Yes, Antifa are not this unsolvable enigma. The issues you see within their groups are manifest in other settings. And certainly with the mental health issues, unfortunately what you have are those who are see an opening to exploit vulnerable people. Okay. Top Jimmy 323 asks, how do we support you? Well, thank you so much for the question. Tuning in is very. I'm glad you're tuning in because you enjoy this content, but it's helpful, right? I think the reason why YouTubers and all these other people who do live streams always start off by saying like my videos, share my videos, subscribe, is because the numbers at the end of the day matter. I try to keep all that stuff to a minimum because I respect you all here. I respect all my social media followers, and I don't want ever you to get the feeling that you are being like you know pressured to do this or that to help me. So I try to keep it to a minimum, but just also the reality is um, I need your financial support to continue to do what I keep doing. So um, I'm gonna pull up my link tree. By the way, I have a link tree. So you can see this on my Getter profile. It's the name is just it's Linktree and then slash Andy NGO, and it has all my links, my website. You can contact me. But under the part that says support Andy News Journalism, there's my locals, my Patreon, my Subscribe Star. That's where you can choose to give a one-time amount or an annual amount. It can be it can be really low. So most people give around $5 a month, and that helps. Some people give more. If you can give more, please do. It helps a lot. This work is challenging to say the least. I'm very grateful for all the support that all of you have provided now for over the years, so I can continue doing this. Thank you. I really mean that. Like, thank you, because there's so many other causes, obviously, that each and every one of you can support, right? Or you can tune into something else. You can watch stuff on YouTube instead of being here, but you're choosing to be here. So thank you so much for that. Other ways you can donate on my PayPal and then my Cash App and my Venmo. The name is at Mr. Andy Ngo. It's the same as my Getter handle, my Twitter handle. There's some links here about my ongoing lawsuit with those who assaulted me in 2019. You remember that lawsuit? It's still ongoing, by the way. Links to my book in different translations, and then all my social media. So okay, that concludes episode 9 of Weekly Notice with Andy Ngo. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions and comments. And I'm going to be ending the live stream now, but please leave your comments in the follow-up posts under the live stream video. I'll be reading those. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.